While the emperor had declared a tie, somewhat ambiguously, both Mozart and Clementi, who enjoyed a thoroughly outward cordial relationship, agreed afterwards that Mozart had won. Clementi wrote,
Until then, I had never heard anyone play with such spirit and grace.
Mozart, on the other hand, was clearly surprised by Clementi's technical facility. He certainly had thought himself unequaled in terms of pianistic skills. As he wrote to his father a year after the competition on June 7, 1783,
Clementi plays well as far as execution with the right hand. His greatest strength lies in his passages and thirds. Apart from that, he doesn't have a
Kreuzer.
Taste or feeling. In short, he is a mere robot. Clementi is a charlatan, like all Italians. He marks presto, but only plays allegro.
Yet apparently Mozart did remember the opening theme of Clementi's Opus 24, No. 2, as he borrowed it 10 years later for his overture to his opera, The Magic Flute. Perhaps Mozart was more impressed with Clementi and influenced by him than he led on to be.
But what if Clementi had played that evening some pieces like this? Or difficulties like this? Or this? I imagine Mozart being a young guy, very aware of his superiority on all musical fields. He must have been very relaxed when he was introduced to Clementi that evening, but his technique at that moment was not on par with that of Clementi. And no, Clementi was not a Mozart, but he was a genius as well. His compositions, also those of that time, showed talent and skill that raised far above the average. So what did Mozart really think when he drove home? My guess would be that he felt really challenged. And what a true genius would do, he did. He adapted the new technical elements he heard and reworked it in his own style. And not much later we would listen to this. Or this. His famous letter to his father, written by Mozart, might to be put in perspective with the overwhelming impression this encounter must have had to him. Imagine his father, anxious to read in a press article about his contest, until then thinking his son would easily win whatever contest they would invent. And Mozart, and this is not based on science but just how I imagine him thinking on this event, anticipated this by pushing down the achievements of Clementi as much as he could. I guess that they both had a good time that evening praising each other, because at that level there exists no such thing as jealousy or sneakiness. And Clementi? Well, how strange the idea of living so much longer than his opponent, being able to read that famous letter written by Wolfgang to his father, in which he takes down his accomplishments of that night, so long ago. And what else could he do than smile silently and agree with every word that Mozart wrote, being proud of the fact that his theme served as the opening of what later would become Mozart's most famous opera.
It is interesting to note that Clementi carefully noted in subsequent publications that his sonata had been written 10 years before Mozart's opera, but he nevertheless retained his admiration for Mozart. He even fashioned a piano solo version of the Zauberflöte overture. Clementi left Vienna in May 1782, and Mozart stayed put. As far as we know, they never met again. However, Mozart did have great respect for Franz Joseph Haydn, as we see in this next scene.